Hi students, in the previous class we have learned about the structure of human ear. Okay, now we are going to see how the ear work. How does the ear perform its function of both hearing and balancing? Okay, now listen up. We have seen that there is the inner ear, and the inner ear has a part called cochlea. So first we are going to explain the mechanism of hearing. So the cochlea of the inner ear is the auditory part that helps for hearing, you know that. And cochlea has three chambers inside. Okay, cochlea has three chambers inside. This is the cross section of cochlea, and you can see there are three chambers. There is an upper chamber, there is a middle chamber, and there is a lower chamber. This chamber is called as scala vestibuli, scala tympani, and scala media. Okay, so you don't need to keep that name in mind. Just you can see that there is an upper chamber, there is a lower chamber, and a middle chamber. Okay, and the middle chamber is separated from the lower chamber by a membrane called basilar membrane. You need to keep that in mind. Basilar membrane, which has specialized sensory hair cells. Okay, here the middle chamber is separated from the lower chamber by a membrane. This membrane, it is called the basilar membrane, and this basilar membrane contains certain specialized hair cells. These are the hair cells. Okay, and together this basilar membrane and the hair cells form what is called the organ of Corti, that is the actual hearing area, area that has for hearing in the cochlea. You got it? So you know that cochlea, if you take a cross section, there are three chambers we can see. The middle chamber is separated from the lower chamber by a membrane. What is the name of that membrane? Basilar membrane. And the basilar membrane contains what? It has specialized sensory hair cells. They are receptors. Okay, and the basilar membrane together with the hair cells form a structure, the important organ called the organ of Corti. Okay, so what is organ of Corti? You need to keep in mind. Okay, so and these two chambers, these are filled with perilymph. Perilymph is seen inside the bony labyrinth, and endolymph is seen inside the membranous labyrinth. So this is the space inside the membranous labyrinth. Okay, this is a membrane, and actually this is part of the what is called the bony labyrinth. Okay, the perilymph area. So only this is the membranous labyrinth there. Okay, so this is perilymph, this is endolymph. Okay, now we can see how we hear a sound. When there is a sound, you know that sound is produced by the vibration of the object that makes the sound. Okay, so when the object vibrates, the sound is produced, and that sound is in the form of waves, and that sound waves vibrate. That vibration vibrates the air column, and as the sound is produced, the air column vibrates, and this is the vibrations, and it will be received by the pinna. Here, see, the vibration is collected by the pinna and is passed through the ear canal, and it hits the eardrum. The vibration collected by the pinna, it passes through the ear canal. See, passes through the ear canal, and it hits the eardrum. So what happens? The eardrum vibrates. Very good. The eardrum vibrates. Now the eardrum vibrates, which causes the malleus. The eardrum vibrates, it causes the malleus, incus, and the stapes to vibrate. So eardrum vibrates, malleus vibrates, incus vibrates, stapes vibrates. Okay, this is the inner ear. Now, since the stapes is attached to the oval window, it vibrates and causes the fluid inside the cochlea to move. See here, the oval window, the stapes, the oval window, when the oval window moves, it causes the fluid to move, and this fluid causes here is the round window to move to this side. Oval window moves this side, round window moves this side. So because of that, what happens, there occurs a shaking of the fluid here. If the round window was not there, the movement of this fluid would have been stopped, and it wouldn't have moved the organ of Corti here. This is the basilar membrane and the hair cells are here. You got it? So what happened? So the oval window moves the fluid. Actually, this is the perilymph, and the perilymph moves the round window to the outside. Oval window moves inside. You got it? And because of this round window is there to receive that backflow of this, and that causes a movement, shaking of this fluid, and that causes the basilar membrane to move. You got it? So that we will discuss that later. So it causes the movement of the fluid inside the cochlea. The stapes moves the oval window causes the movement of the fluid inside the cochlea. Now the fluid movement in the cochlea causes the basilar membrane to move, and the sensory hair cells of the organ of Corti get stimulated. See, when the fluid moves, it causes what happens, the basilar membrane to move, and that causes the movement of the hair cells, and the hair cells get stimulated. You got it? The hair cells get stimulated. This is shown here. You can see the basilar membrane here. When it moves, these hair cells go and touch on this tectorial membrane. This is called tectorial membrane. That is not in your syllabus. So when this go and hits the tectorial membrane, what happened? These hair cells get stimulated. You got it? Now the fluid moves inside the cochlea, causes the basilar membrane, and then the sensory hair cells. And what happens? The sensory hair cells get stimulated. When the receptor cells get stimulated, what happens? Yes, thus an impulse is produced, which is carried by the optic nerve to the auditory center of the brain. See, there an impulse is produced. That impulse is carried by what is called the auditory nerve. I'm sorry, here it is written optic nerve. It is auditory nerve. Auditory nerve. So thus an impulse is produced, which is carried by the auditory nerve to the auditory center of the brain, and the hearing of sound is felt. I'll repeat one more time. See, so what happens when a sound is produced? The ear column vibrates, that is received by the pinna, and it passes through the ear canal, and it hits the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates, that causes the malleus, the lingus, and stapes to vibrate. When the stapes vibrate, what happens? Stapes moves the oval window. The oval window causes the fluid inside the cochlea to vibrate, move. And what happens? The fluid causes the movement of the basilar membrane, which in turn causes the movement of the hair cells, sensory hair cells, receptors, and they get stimulated. When the sensory hair cells or the receptors get stimulated, they produce an impulse. That impulse is passed to the brain or auditory center of the brain by the auditory nerve, and we feel that something is heard, and we feel something is heard, or the feeling of hearing, it is felt. Now the mechanism of balance. What happens? The mechanism of the balance is controlled by the three semicircular canal and the vestibule, called the vestibular apparatus. And the movement of head causes the movement of the endolymph inside the vestibular apparatus. inside the what is called the semicircular canal and the vestibule, there is fluid. Okay, there is endolymph. That endolymph moves, and the movement of the endolymph stimulates the sensory hair cells inside this, where inside the semicircular canal and vestibule. So the balance, controlling of balance is caused due to the movement of the head. Okay, and you know the movement of head, when each semicircular canal is for different types of movement. It responds to different types of movement. One for the up and down movement, one is for the lateral movement, one is for the sideways movement, like that. Okay, and when they move inside the endolymph endolymph inside the vestibule also move, and they stimulates the sensory hair cells which are seen in this region, this solemn region called ampulla. Okay, inside there are sensory hairs. In the vestibule also there are sensory hair cells. They get stimulated and an impulse is produced. Okay, and that impulse will be carried to the cerebellum by vestibular nerve. By the vestibular nerve, you know, here we have seen the vestibular nerve in the, yes, when we learned the structure we have learned that. Okay, there are two types of nerves, the optic nerve and the vestibular nerve. Here you can see here is the vestibular nerve, this is the auditory nerve, and this, the impulse for the balance or that is formed when your head moves, that will be carried by the vestibular nerve. These are the sensory hair cells there in this part. Okay, in the ampullae and the vestibule, and the nerves, these nerves join together to form the vestibular nerve, and it will be carrying the impulse to the cerebellum. Okay, so the movement of head causes a movement of endolymph inside this semicircular canal and vestibule. Then the movement of the vestibule, the endolymph causes the stimulation of the sensory hair cells, and what happens? An impulse is produced. That impulse is carried by the vestibular nerve to the cerebellum. This is how the balance of our body is controlled by the ear and cerebellum. Got it? Okay, so you need to read the textbook and go through my video and understand that. Okay, now you need to complete a flow chart based on the mechanism of hearing. So you know that the sound waves produced, that is collected by the pinna, it goes through the auditory canal or the external auditory meatus, are also called ear canal. Then it goes to the tympanum or the eardrum, it vibrates. Then it causes the ear ossicles to vibrate. That causes the oval window to vibrate or move. That causes the cochlear fluid to move. That causes the sensory hair cells to move. That produce an impulse. Impulse is carried by the auditory nerve to the brain. Okay, the auditory center of the brain, and we get the sense of hearing. Okay, so complete this flow chart and try to make a flow chart for the process of balancing, the mechanism of balancing. Okay, thank you, and you all have a great day.